Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, transforming the way people think and work so their organizations can thrive. Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to our podcast. I'm Ed Kless, and with me today is Howard Tiersky. Howard is the Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance. He was named by IDG as one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers to follow today, and by Enterprise Management 360 as one of the top 10 digital transformation influencers that will change your world. Howard has launched 2 successful companies that help large brands transform to thrive in the digital age, from the Digital Transformation Agency and Innovation Loft. Welcome to the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast, Howard Tiersky.
Oh, thanks so much, Ed. Happy to be here.
Well, first off, Howard, why do you do what you do?
Well, I think I've always loved creating experiences for people. My training originally was in theater. I went to school to be a theater director and directed theater professionally for a time early in my career. And when the digital world became a mass medium, I got very excited about it because of the opportunity to do many of the things that I loved about theater, to create experiences that people could enjoy, but also that mattered in some way, that helped them, had an impact on people. Working together collaboratively with creative people and technical people to create something for an audience. And of course, what's amazing about digital is the scale of the audience is amazing. The opportunity to reach all around the world and to reach people these days, of course, in their pockets and the devices that they have with them all the time. So whether we're just trying to make it easier for someone to rent a car or check their 401k balance or get a tow truck in an emergency or, engage in an entertainment experience, that opportunity to have an impact on people's day and make their lives a little bit better that's the thing that really gets me out of bed in the morning.
And tell me about what you think this new normal is going to look like as we come out of the challenges of COVID-19.
Oh, it's going to be really interesting. Well, there's no question that COVID has pushed digital transformation forward faster. And I think what we've seen is that probably 75 to 80% of the move that people made into a more digital lifestyle, people have liked. If I talk to people who, for example, moved to a much higher percentage, 100% at some point of telecommuting, generally what we heard is, wow, it's working really good. People really liked the flexibility. It didn't impair productivity. It didn't impair collaboration in a significant way. Telemedicine, people love the ability to just, jump on a Zoom with their doctor instead of driving there and, the whole waiting in line, waiting for the doctor and all that. So many aspects. I think the big exception, I think, is that digital remote education has not been super successful. So I think that is an example of one that I think we're going to go back to much more the traditional classroom experience until someone can figure out how to make a more remote classroom experience more effective. Because by and large, I think if you ask most educators and students, they would say they didn't like it. But in most other domains, I think people are going to keep using Instacart more than ever. I think people are going to keep, binge watching Netflix more versus getting in a car and go to a movie theater. They're going to keep ordering Uber Eats more than before. Of course, there's going to be a certain retrenching. I mean, of course, we want to go out to a restaurant, but I don't think you're going to see it go back to the levels it was before in terms of in restaurant dining. And it might first zoom up higher because there's this bounce back effect, like what we're seeing now with revenge travel, as they call it. But I think ultimately we're going to see a great deal of shift in the percentage of these types of digital interactions and digital ways of doing business. And it'll be interesting to see how it affects policy. For example, we're seeing a real split in companies today. Some companies are announcing like, hey, we're going back. Like, okay, guys, COVID is over. I want everyone back in the office by, September 1st or whatever else. So, expect to be back to the old normal. And then there's other companies that have said, hey, we're getting rid of 2/3 of our real estate in large cities. We're going to save $25 million by not renewing our leases because we've learned that this really works well. So it'll be interesting to see, there's these different approaches to going back versus sort of doubling down on the changes from COVID. And then you see it in things like insurance policy. My wife is a psychologist, for example. And so during the COVID period, she was permitted to see her patients by Zoom. Normally, the insurance company wouldn't reimburse for Zoom patient sessions. And so they waived the rules because, of course, of the circumstances. And so it'll be a question of now, will they get away? Will consumers allow them to go back and say, nope, now you got to drive to your doctor's office? or will they be forced now that everyone's been spoiled by the convenience? Of course, you're not going to have every physical, medical, you're not going to go to your dentist by Zoom. But, a lot of my daughter had a problem with her foot, and we had a podiatrist looked at it, told what to do. Now a lot of things can be done with a camera and a Zoom connection. So I think bottom line, we're going to see more stay than go, but in some areas, it'll be interesting, and it might be a battle.
So I want to take you back to something you said earlier in in the conversation about education, because I think this is an interesting point. So yes, I would agree with you that there's been challenges from K through 12 and even in the college space with regard to education. But do you think companies have figured out remote education perhaps a little bit better than colleges and universities in K through 12? And if so, can K through 12 and colleges learn from that?
I think that companies have figured out remote collaboration and remote communication better, but there may be an element to learning which is different from normal, say, meetings and communication that is harder to do digitally, via telecommunicating, Zoom and other platforms. So I do think that, as you mentioned, it's more problematic in K to 8. High school, not as good, but better than the younger grades. College, not as good as in person, but better than high school. And I think that as we have older and older students, the impact seems to be less problematic. And it also depends what you're learning, of course, right? If you're learning something like Excel, it makes a lot more sense to do that remotely and bring up Excel and it's all there. If you're learning something that's very physically oriented, you're learning car repair, of course, it's going to be a lot harder to learn that on Zoom than in a garage with, the materials you can work with. So I think that I think age has something to do with it and the subject has something to do with it. But I think that learning in general, even at the corporate level, has not proved to be as easy a nut to crack as communications, meetings, collaboration, brainstorming, ideation, even conferences. I just spoke this morning at a large conference, which used to be all in person, at a big hotel, and now they're doing it digitally. I think we're about 800 or 900 people on at this financial services conference, and it seems to work great. Has downsides, but also advantages that you don't get. For example, some conferences are able to spread themselves out. Instead of being 3 concentrated days, they do 6 afternoons spread out over the course of 3 weeks. Easier for people to attend because you don't have that issue of I had to fly to one place. So, and that's a learning format. You could argue conferences, but that real detailed learning where you're learning a skill, I think we really haven't cracked that nut quite the way we have others.
And you did mention also the notion of with your wife and the psychology being able to see patients is part of that regulatory, right? As will the governments allow people to go back to those things?
Yeah, 100%. We see rules and regulations from many levels, right? At the corporate level, at the local and state levels, at the federal level, at various regulatory bodies. Certain banking regulations were lifted, like certain requirements of signature,
like not being able to wear a mask. You are not allowed to wear a mask in a bank.
Oh,
it's
right.
considered bad.
That's right. That's a good point. Well, now you're required. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I think you're also required to carry a gun, right? No, maybe not.
Depends on what state you're in.
Yes,
we have an exit question that we ask all of our guests, and that is, who is a hero of yours and why are they a hero?
Oh, gosh. So many heroes, some of the ones that come to mind would be like entertainers who've really, like Steven Spielberg or Jim Henson, people who created amazing original experiences. But I think like in terms of affecting my life, I guess I'd probably have to say Tony Robbins. I've had the opportunity to work with the Tony Robbins organization for like 15 years. And he has contributed, I think, to the world such an insightful approach to thinking about the human mind and psychology. And, many people may not be familiar with it, but if you look at his work, he is a teacher, an educator, really, of how to manage your own feelings and emotions, to live the emotional life that you want, to be happy, basically, and also motivation, how to really do a great job of figuring out what you want in life and really drive yourself to be happily moving yourself towards the things that you really want to accomplish in your life. And that's had a huge impact on me. And I've had the privilege to get to participate in a lot of his events and other things and to see the impact it's had on so many millions and millions and millions of people. And now he's doing events with hundreds of thousands of people digitally. And it's just a joy to see. So I would say in terms of somebody that's like not just someone from afar, but somebody who I get to observe. He's just an amazing thing, and the organization and the things he's built have touched so many people. The experiences he's created for so many people are life-changing, and so I'll put him at the top of my list.
And lastly, Howard, how can somebody contact you?
Sure. Well, you mentioned earlier my book. If you're interested in learning more about my Wall Street Journal best-selling book, Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance, you can go to the website, winningdigitalcustomers.com, where you can also download the first chapter for free. Or you can find me on social media by fortunately, I'm not John Smith, Howard Tiersky. I'm the only Howard Tiersky out there. So if you Google me or look for me on LinkedIn, I do live casts on LinkedIn twice a week and publish a lot of content there, and also have a podcast. So if you search for my podcast, also called Winning Digital Customers.
All right. And a link to that free chapter will be in the show notes, so you can just click it from below. But Howard Tiersky, Wall Street Journal bestselling author of Winning Digital Customers, The Antidote to Irrelevance, thanks so much for being a guest on the Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.
Thanks, Ed.
Review and subscribe by searching your podcast player of choice for Sage Thought Leadership Podcast.